And I was so excited when Justin said he wanted to do an event together because I have known Justin for a while and like him a lot. And he's a great writer and a great human being. And also, it's a really, really wonderful book. Small Altars is a book that is sincere and creative in its approach to grief. Which is something that maybe we've all had too much of, but there won't be any shortage of it as life goes on. I'm gonna let Justin get started and then we'll trade off a little bit.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, it's a pleasure to get to read with you. I remember when I met you at a Warren Wilson residency, would have been in like early 2000s, maybe 2003 or something like that. I don't know. But okay, so I'm just going to read the start of this book, Small Altars, which is for my brother who passed away in 2019, and it is a lot about superheroes and comic books. My brother and I were really into comic books as kids, and that was an interest that he kept throughout his life. And I thought that I would use that as a means for exploring our relationship. So it starts with an epigraph by Tony Stark. Then again, that's the hero gig. Part of the journey is the end. That's from Avengers Endgame, the movie. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to pay someone a significant amount of money for use of that quote, but I didn't. So yes, so I'll just read the first section. My brother plays the piano, the video loop displayed on a wide screen. We see him in profile, a black t-shirt and thinning hair, seated at an old scarred Beckstein. A heavy man at the time, soft. You would expect his plump fingers to struggle at finding all the right notes, but they don't, at least not to my untrained ear. His posture is surprisingly upright, his eyes fixed intently on the sheet music before him. For this is his chance to be taken seriously, by others, by himself. He's playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, the poet's song, though I do not know this yet. Surely by now I have heard him play this piece 100 times, but for some reason I have never bothered to look it up. Behind my brother is a light green gymnasium wall, the school and center where he works. This is their annual awards banquet, and they have invited him again to play. In preparation for this day, my brother has been practicing for weeks, for years, for his entire life. A door creaks open somewhere behind him as my brother lifts his hands slowly from the last drawn-out notes. Then he turns towards the camera where our father sits, and he smiles. There is some commotion. I turn back to the solemn room. My brother's best friend, who I have only just met, is having one of her seizures. Chairs and a table are pushed clear. People huddle close by. On the screen behind me, my brother begins playing his next song. The shirt of his friend is lifted up, exposing her pale stomach as she wriggles helplessly on the floor. Her young daughter, kneeling beside her, reaches over and pulls the shirt back into place. We had decided to call this event a celebration. But make no mistake, this is about death.
Yeah, it is about death. One of the things that Justin and I have in common as authors is death of a greatly loved one, his brother and my late husband, the writer Kevin McElroy. And we both each found ourselves writing about death in close quarters to its happening. Writers often feel that they need to get some perspective on something before writing about it, but sometimes the imperative to write is like the necessity to survive. I was wondering, Justin, you might have told me this before, but what was the first part of it that you wrote?
Yeah, well, so I've been writing about my brother for I would say close to 20 years, and so I when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I started a sequence of poems that I refer to as superhero elegy poems, and so I wrote a handful of those and published a couple of them in my book of poetry. And the others were just sort of sitting in a drawer. And so I had those. I had a lot of other drafts of poems or notes that I had taken. So yeah, I mean, I had a lot of material already when I started to write the book. My brother died in 2019, and I started to kind of just work in little fragments and until this summer. He died in August, so until the next summer, I kind of wasn't working on a project so much as just sort of piecing together different things and adding to the pile, I guess.
Yeah, that's much what I found myself doing. My husband died at the end of September in 2022. And the first piece that I wrote, I actually started just a few days or a few weeks after he died, because I needed to put it somewhere, the grief. And so that eventually that piece became an essay called His Body, that was recently published in the Cincinnati Review. And I was going to read a bit of that. And then Justin mentioned working in fragments, because sometimes that's all you can do, right, is get a particular memory down or something that has an emotional charge to it and you don't know what you're going to do with it. And I found that I needed to, I felt a great compulsion to not be pitiful in writing about this. My husband had died on the tennis court, so of a cardiac arrest, and I wasn't there when he died. I first saw the body in the emergency room. And the shock of that was something that I wanted to write about. I didn't want to be pitiful. I wanted to tamp down the emotion. So I ended up mixing it with facts, footnoted facts. And said that this segmented essay juxtaposes my experiences with the dead beloved's body, emergency eye surgery, theories of extramission and green burial, and self-grafting in trees. So I'm just going to read, beginning with the second paragraph of it, which is one of the facty bits. The ancient Greeks puzzled out the phenomenon of human vision. How was it possible to see or not see? According to their theory of extramission, a person's elemental fire tucked behind the eye's dark pupil projected outward to seek and palpate objects, then bring back to the viewer what was discovered in that field of vision. This theory for centuries underlay romantic and devotional notions about tactile ties between the viewer and the viewed. Worshippers kneeling before icons believed themselves to actually caress the holy object with their gaze. Cupid's bow shots weren't only metaphor. A lover's body was genuinely pierced by extramissive arrows of their beloved's sight, binding the two into one. John Donne wrote, "Our eye beams twisted and did thread our eyes upon one double string." So I'm now in the emergency room, seated alongside his body. A gaze touches my hand, locked with his. I hold the hand of a dead man, connected, not releasing. The nurse's eyes lift away as his surprise shifts to sympathy. We converse about necessary arrangements. A living body will need this room, this gurney, soon. My fingers remain the cradle for the dead hand, colder now that an hour has passed, stiffening. Each ridge of each nail, the cuticle torn yesterday, the scars and calluses and age spots accumulated through 7 decades, all as familiar as my own flesh. The nurse draws the shade, leaves, latches the door. Privacy, but lingering subtle pressure for me to be done, to move on. I raise the sheet, take a last tour of his nakedness, caress those long limbs, the narrow chest. His face holds my gaze, corpse gray, yet paradoxically younger, smoother than over coffee this morning. His suffering, thousands of sleepless nights, lost suns, thwarted ambition, settling like the stagnant blood now pooling in his torso. I lift one eyelid, then the other. Cornflower blue, those eyes, still, completely stilled, lifeless, yet somehow some light, something innately him, his reliable generative capacity for joy, his avidness for living and giving remains. Banked elemental fire? Those eyes meeting mine the first time and every time did pierce, did thread me to him. Above the shoulders of any crowd, across the table's width or a room's span, a detonation, a stomach jolt, heart lift, a deep twisting dive that shot the world away and bound us in a single skin. 2 trees in close quarters sometimes fuse in a natural phenomenon called inosculation. Limbs touch, then braid, friction abrades bark, and from that small wound, self-grafting can result. In forestry, those conjoined trees are known as gemels, from the Latin word meaning a pair. Leaving his body, I feel our tie rip, but I do not look back. At home, I lie down and wonder if my heart could stop too, so that I could die, because we are over. The sight, the scent, the weight, the taste, the heat of him now gone, cut away, no recourse. 10 days past his death, my retina ties off the eye wall, tears off the eye wall. So, fragments, small segments. I found that structure was a saving strategy for writing. If you want to talk about the structuring of your book once you did get to the project of it?
Well, sure. In the way of incorporating facts, that was definitely something that I found myself drawn to as a way in that piece that you just, that section that you just read, how it moves away and then back to the personal. That was something that I felt like I definitely wanted to be doing, making use of inside the book. Really, research came before a lot of the writing. I started to research comic books, which, as I said, was an interest of my brother's, but something that I'd very much moved away from in my adult life. But when I felt like I wasn't ready to write about some of the circumstances surrounding his death or his life, I just sort of checked out books on understanding comic books, and I ended up writing these sections that I think of as kind of like a glossary of terms sections, and there are, I don't know, about 8 of them in the book, and they are largely factual, and I'll just read one of those sections.
I love
now.
those, by the way.
Thank you. A comic book panel, alternately known as a frame or box, is one drawing on a page containing a segment of action. Encapsulation is the art of capturing prime moments in a story inside the layout of a page. Panels may be non-sequential or even asynchronous, spanning more than one moment in time. Clair de Lune, French for light of the moon, is the third and most famous movement of Claude Debussy's Sweet Bergamasque. It is a piano depiction of a poem by Paul Verlaine. Debussy began composing the suite around 1890 at the age of 28. In comics, sound effects are words without bubbles that mimic sounds. They are not subtle and are often used to help depict a fight scene with a decorative wham or boom. Debussy wrote Clair de Lune in the key of D flat with a 9/8 meter. It is meant to be played in pianissimo, which is the softest dynamic in music. Almost everything my brother did was loud. He had a booming voice, which extended to his laughter and his cough. He was a loud chewer of food and a prodigious snorer. He preferred to listen to the television at levels that struck me as absurd, and whenever he walked through the house, you knew exactly where he was. But my brother could also play Debussy and pianissimo. It did not come naturally to him, though eventually he learned. I'm not even sure when it happened. One year I came home and noticed that he was no longer indiscriminately pounding away at the keys for every piece of music. I think it was over the last years of his life, when he knew he would soon die, that he taught himself that delicacy. Can I ask, Mac was a dear friend of mine as well, and I miss him. And I just, if it's not too personal of a question, how do you feel like your relationship with him has grown or changed through your recent writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because one of the lines that I pulled out of your book that I loved was, I do believe that these sentences can carve out a place for the two of us to be brothers again, even after he's gone. And I've been very aware of, since my husband was a writer, the page was one place that we met, literally, and throughout our 14 years of marriage. Yeah, to be talking about writing and to be talking about creative process. And then, as some people know, I've worked on 3 books of his since he's died, 3 posthumous books. The last one that is finished but not yet published is a book of his teachings called Willingness, which I hope will be coming out next year. But I've been immersed in every aspect of his writing, his finished poems and stories, the files, electronic and paper files I've been digging through to get the material for the 3rd book. So it feels as if the relationship is actually deepened. I ended up feeling, I guess I shouldn't say ended up, at this point I feel like my relationship is with his absence, which is a strange thing. It's sort of like, it's like a negative capability or a negative space kind of thing, but I don't know what I would have done without the chance to write about him.
Yeah, I feel very thankful for this writing project that I had. It seems like, I mean, I'm not really interested in like a cathartic approach to art. Like, I'm not trying to like move past or even like say goodbye so much, but like to just like feel more connected to his absence, I guess, and to his life. So I don't know, for me, it's been a great way it's been like one last act to try and be a good brother to him, you know, which wasn't always easy to do. But so I'm real thankful for the project of writing about it.
Yeah, and as you say, to be the difficulty of being a good brother, a good sibling to another thing that Justin and I share is I have a disabled older sister for whom I'm largely responsible. She doesn't live with me, but I am responsible for her. And so there was much about the book that rang true to me, that struggle to be the struggle when dealing with a differently able or less able sibling to not feel guilty all the time, or at least not to feel guilty in a way that disables your ability to be a sibling. And those balancing those out with thoughts of, as you say, that when it was his birthday or your birthday, it was like the same birthday because you got to share the toys. And my disabled sister was like one of my kids. So, I mean, the time that she had best in my life was playing with my children, even though she was an adult in her 40s. She would play My Little Ponies for hours. So there is in the project of writing that ability to get deeper and deeper and deeper in relationships. I think it's my turn. Well, one of yet another thing that I learned from Justin's book, from that the glossary of terms, that term retcon, which you said is retroactive continuity when a character's past is changed in order to make sense of the evolving story. For me, the aspect of creating a narrative out of confusion has been a necessary survival tactic for me and my lost beloved. And for a long time, during the second year, after that retina tore off the eye wall, I had retina repaired, but then I had a lot of other trouble with the eye, and I couldn't see properly for 6 or 8 months, all the time while I was trying to write books and generally survive. And there's another piece that I had recently published called Wobble, which deals with that period of time when I felt like I was completely confused about everything. Visually, I couldn't see. I could barely see. And about everything I felt 2 ways, which is why it was called Wobble. So I'll read just a little bit from that piece. The beloved was a gardener, and that's where this section starts. Spring grows fulsome. The beloved's garden rebounds despite too late and deeply killing freezes. Peonies burst their tight bud corsets. Hostas fist pump skyward. Ferns unfurl. Iris blossoms unsheathe into origami bee palaces. I feel this seasonal renewal, life force persisting past setback, and recognize that my participation, watching, weeding, and watering, signals that I too am a living, persisting thing. I will, without conscious choice to do so, go on without him. Feeling shaky about that, I drive 500 miles with a woman I've known since 6th grade to a beach we've never seen before. The sea and the big sky soothe, and throughout that vast space, his absence is ever present. I wade deep into his finished and unfinished manuscripts, shepherding 3 books toward posthumous publication, and that immersion is solace and strain as it reminds me, complicates, resets who I know and knew him to be. I fly west to hike the Cascades with a friend who knew us both for 30 years. In the moment I enter her house, I am embarrassingly undone by memories of dancing with him there in her kitchen. And all the while, my eyesight gets worse as I bounce between siloed specialists. Between appointments, I keep pushing my eyes to their limit, pressing on with his books and beginning another of my own. The beloved in lectures spoke of dynamic balance, which his artist's pedagogy defined as the simultaneous condition of about to fall into, about to fall out of balance. He meant by this the embodied tension of paradox, getting up while falling down, in the moment when either is possible but neither has happened yet, and the one is still indistinguishable from the other. The first dozen or so times I heard him speak on this energizing attribute of literary structure, I felt intrigued but flummoxed. Elegant concept, but how to do it? I understand it now best as experiential expression of the Buddhist pedagogy on the middle way, the path rocky, vertiginous, uphill, and ambiguous all the way, between attachment and aversion, neither grasping far nor turning away from emotions, people, experiences, feeling the pull one way and the other, while choosing not the one or the other, but instead abiding in the wobble in between. I do feel that that's a place I've spent and continue to spend most of my time, not knowing, trying to keep and find balance.
That's great usable metaphor there that you had from your own vision issues. That
yeah, something wanted to provide me with material. Yeah. What did you find most challenging in putting this book together?
Yeah, so I think the idea of trying to not to not sentimentalize things, to try and paint a full picture of some of the difficult aspects of my brother was hard for me, and that was something that I still have a hard time when I read sections that are I don't know, that it talk about some of his problems. My brother was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic in his 20s. So there was a lot of baggage that came with that, obviously. So yeah, I'll read a section that speaks of that at least a little. And superheroes, which is always the like safety valve to kind of like keep
the dynamic balance.
Yeah, there you go. All superheroes have an origin story, the series of events, most often tragic, that give birth to their powers and lead them into becoming who they are today. Tony Stark, before he became Iron Man, was a millionaire playboy and an ingenious scientist. They say his character was modeled after Howard Hughes, without the crippling neurosis, telling which plot lines we remain true to, which details we add and subtract, what we choose to replace. My brother was born with a borderline learning disability. He did not excel at sports or school. He never had a girlfriend or finished college or got a decent job. In his 20s, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and much of the 15 years that followed was wasted away in breakdowns, treatments, a revolving series of doctors and meds. If this were a Hollywood movie, or even a decent comic book, we could expect here a turning. Then one day it happened, and he became. But in the theater of this life, my brother was only ever cast to play himself. Minor role, thankless task. And so, after a few years where he had kept things mostly together, he contracted a rare form of cancer. And 3 years later, at the age of 44, he died. My brother's story is one of the saddest I know. But much of that comes down to me. My failure to recognize how he could ever be content, happy even, with what little he had. A job mopping floors, a one-bedroom apartment. Years, a whole decade in fact, when our aging father and mother were his only real friends.
It is just a beautiful portrait of Aaron throughout the book. It's put together from these fragments, from memories, from images of him, especially with the piano. But I feel that you have made a really true, humane portrait of him.
Thank you.
And I can understand you. I don't want to drive you to the tears. one of the things I did when I kept looking, I kept doing what I call solace scrolling online when I couldn't sleep during the grief process. And I kept coming across some that seemed like the same kinds of quotes. And Rilke has a quote about seeing the partner or the loved one whole against the sky. And that figures in a piece that I wrote, but I felt like I could see Aaron whole against the sky, and that's what you had been able to achieve.
Do you, in the pieces you've been working on about Mac, do you write about his music at all? I know you write about dancing with him.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, actually, he turns up dancing in a dream here, which I'll read in a bit. But it's very difficult to write about music. He was good at that. I tell you that the most solacing thing I have is to listen to his playlists, because he left hundreds of playlists in iPod and a computer. And when I am most blue, if I put those on, when they played for a dance or something like that, it's really uplifting. Yeah. So people leave things behind for your loved ones. Leave them your playlists and your books, and record your voice on your phone and leave it, because they're going to want that. I mean, he was as a performer, he was very conscious. He left so much stuff. And I'm really, really, really lucky in that way. I hope we're doing well on time.
We're at 6:45.
Okay.
So,
So I'll just read this last little bit, and then, I think Justin has another bit too. So the solace scrolling, this is part of a yet another piece, segmented, where it's a combination of inside, outside, in between is the name of the piece. And the inside is my worries, the outside is things happening to me in the world, and the in between are dreams, either mine or other people's, and of me trying to, I guess, to be in dynamic balance. But since I brought up the Rilke quote, this part starts with that. For weeks, I keep tripping across some version of Rilke's words on partners as guardians of one another's solitude. Once the realization is, this is the quote, once the realization is accepted that even between the closest human beings, infinite distances continue. A wonderful living side by side can grow if they succeed in loving the distance between them, which makes it possible for each to see the other whole against the sky. Late in October, the high desert of southwest New Mexico, terrain I'd seen just once before, and in the company of the beloved, the moment our divided paths at last converged, a weekend in the wilderness before the long drive east to begin in the 6th decade of our lives, our marriage. Hiking in the strong light that enveloped him and his writing for 30 years, I feel peace and release, empty and aching, but suffused somehow with him. That night, he turns up in a dream. I should say that I didn't dream of him much, and when I did, usually there was something wrong with him. I mean, it was like a puppet, or he was inanimate, not fully animate. It was disturbing. So this is the dream when he's not like that. I watch him dance, alone, but for my eyes. He is graceful, lithe, far younger than at his death, perhaps at the age we met, his early 40s. He smiles to himself, his gaze downturned and inward, grooving on what he hears and feels. He doesn't acknowledge my looking, but I know he knows I'm there. I feel it, lovely, clear as day, his connection to me, and his happiness inside it. I am its witness. Waking, writing down the dream, I see I've been granted a vision of his separate integrity, who he was, not who I wanted him to be or believed or needed him to be. In our life together and all over again in death, he's shown me his essence. An odd, happy dream.
I never, I don't dream of my brother, but I do try to connect with him through watching silly movies. And so sometimes it's easy to imagine him there with me. I'll just read this last real short section, I guess, about that. Late at night, when my wife is away, I stream another Marvel movie or leaf through old comic books. I'm hoping that somewhere inside this elaborate world, with its colorful sidekicks and rotating henchmen, with its glaring plot holes and skin-fitting tights, there will be a door that I can pass through, a way to feel close to someone who is gone. But I feel claustrophobic inside these bordered panels, the exclamation marks of each silly utterance. They are speaking to a boy I once or never was, and I can't manufacture an entrance back to where I want to go. Comics are, after all, just a collection of still shots. Despite the unfolding drama, the mid-flight heroics, and hackneyed sound effects, nothing ever moves. And the only real action falls inside the cracks of the paneled page. The world separated, like it always is, into what comes before and what comes after. I think that maybe I don't know, something that helped me in trying to avoid sentimentality is that my brother had bad taste, and so I could talk about the silly Hollywood movies he liked in a way that allowed me to kind of crack a joke or be in some way judgmental about the things, and that just sort of helped me to keep the ship balanced, I guess, as I was writing.
Yeah.
Mac had great taste. You don't have that to fall back.
Yeah, I have been aware, though, that the one who's left standing gets to control the narrative, and I have felt responsibility for for the narrative that I create. Yeah. Should we have questions?
Yeah,
or-
I don't have a question online, but if you.
Yeah, I just
I have one
want-
in the house.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those very intimate stories on your relationships. My question, Justin, is to you. Are you the older or younger?
Younger.
Younger.
Yeah, 2 years younger.
Pardon me?
2 years younger.
2 years younger. Did he know you were planning to write a book?
No. I mean, my brother, he liked to read YA books, and he knew I was a writer, certainly, but I don't think he ever knew that I wrote things about him. Yeah.
And I'm curious about your relationship growing up with a 2-year age difference.
Yeah, we were real close growing up. He was older, but he didn't have much of a social life. He didn't have a lot that he was doing on his own other than playing the piano, which he loved to do and often did because he didn't have other things to do. But so he was always around. He was with me and my friends, and so so we had a good childhood together.
You were friends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, one that makes my sister was older, it's a disabled sister too, and that having being the kid brother, kid sister, and having feeling responsibility for the older one is an interesting way to navigate in the world. Yeah. And you mentioned in the book that he never, I can't remember the exact words, but he never held it against you for having a better life than he did. And that's another piece of real humanity about him.
Can you talk a little bit about how your perceptions of the grief that you've been working through with writing, or itself might have changed, might be different now than it was when you were doing the writing. Because that's happened. You know,
Yeah.
there's some time has passed, and I wonder if you have an observation about the
Yeah, I mean, so I sort of said already, I kind of feel like I was writing this book for the last 20 years. And so it's something that I knew I was going to do. But certainly like there were things that I wasn't expecting to happen that become a part of the story. So like when my brother passed away, I found a bunch of his journals. And so that was an unexpected turn there for the writing process, because I am a writer, but I didn't think of my brother as one.
Yeah, discoveries. Yeah, and for me, definitely, you know, like the piece His Body that I started right after his death, I didn't think I was writing a piece of, I was just writing it down because it was such an incredible thing in the negative sense that happened to me, you know, we had lunch and he went out to the tennis court and I never saw him again except dead. And I needed to, to get that on the page. I just knew as a writer to stick to the sensory details. That's what I would tell a class to do with highly emotional material. But I didn't think I was making something out of it until a lot later. And I can't remember to whom I should attribute this, but some other writer has said this, that when you are making something, the act of making it, of taking words and putting it on emotion and making it into a piece, somehow just change your relationship to it. It puts a distance to it between you and the material, at the same time that it doesn't distance you from it. I don't know how to explain that quite right. It allows you to live in it with what Mac would call the self-forgetting of creative process. Even though you're writing about yourself and your own feelings, there's still a self-forgetting because you're in that channeling, that creative flow. Does that sort of answer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you. It looks like we don't have more questions from the at-home audience, so if there's any more in the store. Otherwise, it's almost 7 o'clock, and so yeah, I'll just invite you to share any final words before we wrap up and move to book signing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Yeah, it's been really good to do this together because Justin and I in some ways are very not alike, but there's some kind of I don't know, cosmic or karmic connection here in these materials, and it's been very good for me, to read his book and think about it and to prepare for this event. It's been really good for me.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah.